This guy was as cold and calculated as they come. Maybe we weren't going to get it solved.
It was like the epitome of innocence that had been preyed upon.
This is a case that has no evidence. We didn't have DNA. We didn't have fingerprints.
Step inside the court of law with the new true crime podcast, American Justice.
We realized we have 4 men who answered the same ad for a job on a farm.
My brother Ralph went to interview and he was never seen again.
A podcast that explores impactful crimes and reveals how our justice system works.
You have to consider that there are more possibilities than one.
And sometimes how it doesn't.
We have to find whoever this monster is.
Go in depth into chilling cases and their conclusions in this new true crime series.
You just have a pit in your stomach thinking, how many people are we going to find?
New episodes of American Justice are available every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of The Prosecutors is brought to you by Huggies Little Movers. Get your baby's butt into Huggies Little Movers. We got you, baby. I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are The Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, a family of 4 vanishes after a frantic phone call, never to be found. What happened to the Thompson family? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my skittering co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. What a fun word. No idea what that meant, but you know what? That's exactly what I needed to hear tonight, because that put a smile on my face.
That's Dutch. It means amazing, I'm sure, in some form or fashion, in some correct pronunciation. Stephanie sent that one in, so thank you, Stephanie, for another word. For Alice, there's always room for more if anybody's out there wanting to offer their superlatives for Alice. I mean, at this point, we got like 260-something episodes, so I need more words.
I'm impressed there are enough words that don't all mean, mean things at this point.
Yes.
So y'all help him out, because Brett tends to gear towards
mean words
homeless.
are fine. I'm fine with mean words.
I'm going to have a vote for not fine. But you guys have put up with long series of different cases, and we have a relatively short but incredibly devastating case for you today. Brett, I don't know. You know, some cases, I don't know if it's like your stage in life, or you've just covered a DUI, hit and run for a very long time, for months it seems like, and a case that's just like utterly devastating. It hits you in the gut, and this case hits me in the gut.
Man, this one's rough, guys. I'm not sure why this story is not more well covered on true crime. There's hardly anything out there on it. We got a lot of the information for this case from the Chicago Tribune, which covered this case pretty extensively. Cold and Missing podcast covered it. Dark Matters on YouTube. But that's about it. I'll tell you this, if you are trying to research this case and you're Googling the Thompson family, you will almost assuredly end up on the Thompson family extension, which, let me just say, is completely different. Was a rabbit hole that I fell down while researching this. It's what we call analog horror these days. It's like a YouTube, TikTok, urban legend type thing. It reminded me a lot of House of Leaves. It's completely different from this story. So if you go down that rabbit hole, just know that if you hit that Thompson family, that is a different family altogether. This is a family of 4 from Chicago, an African-American family, which honestly, I wonder if that has something to do with this case not being as well covered. We've now covered 3 cases of entire families disappearing. This family disappearance thing, I just am blown away by the fact it happens. But we did the Jameson family, which is pretty famous, Then the Jack family, which is not covered at all, which was just a mind-blowing case. This case is tragic. There is some mystery to this case, but I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't think there's a ton. I think we know at least who is responsible, but we still don't know what happened to these people. And I think it's a story that's worth telling, and it's a story to think about. And once again, it brings in some of those same questions about what exactly were the police doing? Why were they not more engaged in what was happening to this family? And that's something we're going to talk about as we get into the details. But just prepare yourself. There's some punch in the gut moments in this case.
So for those of you who don't know this story, and really I think most people don't because of how little it's been covered, it really does seem like it's impossible that you can have an entire family vanish without a trace, but that's exactly what happened to the Thompson family in the summer of 1996. Everett Thompson moved to Chicago, Illinois from Philadelphia, chasing an opportunity to work in Chicago's steel mills. He not only found a steady job, but he also met his wife, Lydia. The pair fell hard for each other, and they were married in 1982. And it was a happy marriage, and 2 sons followed shortly after, Everett Jr. and Andrew. They built a life together as a family, but Everett had this dream beyond just rolling steel. He wanted to open a restaurant, and Lydia supported him enthusiastically. The couple bought a restaurant in Chicago's Park Manor neighborhood, which they named Eat and Company. Eat was actually Everett's initials. Worked out very well because he always wanted to own a restaurant. And the family was happy and they were successful. And they even had an opportunity to move into a new home, one in Chicago's South Side, which Lydia had inherited from her parents when they passed away. But it would be this blessing of a home that Lydia's parents had hoped would make their lives easier, which would turn out to be the trigger to a terrible tragedy that came. Unfortunately, Lydia didn't own this house free and clear. Rather, when her parents passed away, they passed on the home to their 3 children. So Lydia owned just 1/3 of the home, with her 2 brothers owning the other portions.
Yeah, and hey, just a piece of advice out there, never do this because it never works out. I mean, if there's one thing that divides families more than money, I don't know what it is because you see this happen so often and parents are trying to be fair. But in this case, like in so many cases, it's going to divide this family and it's going to lead to tragedy. Unfortunately, like I said, even in the best of circumstances, I think this sets you up for some tension. This was not the best of circumstances because while Lydia, by all accounts, is an upstanding person, one of her brothers, Kenneth White, is not. He is not a nice guy at all. In fact, he had a history of violence and instability. He'd been in prison, but in February of 1996, he was released. And wouldn't you know it, when he got out of prison, he was ready to claim his birthright. He wanted to move into the old family home. Now, this is a situation that Kenneth is not happy about it because he wants the house all to himself. The Thompson family is certainly not happy about it. I mean, this is a mom and dad with 2 young boys, and they have this man who is a violent person, someone they haven't seen in years because he's been in prison. All of a sudden, he wants to move in. He's going to be around their kids. Now, he wanted the house all to himself. So this situation was toxic, and the animosity grew and grew, and it finally peaked in July of 1996 when Kenneth reportedly threatened Lydia with an axe on more than one occasion. And let me just tell you, when this comes out, it'll be probably September. This could easily be an October episode just because of how horrific it is. And sometimes I feel like we talk about these cases and we get into sort of the groove of talking about the facts and you sort of laying it out for you and the timeline. And we forget about just the absolute horror that is wrapped up in this. And I just want you to imagine this man who's been in prison with an axe. I mean, this is like something out of a horror movie. And this is the kind of thing they're dealing with. And it's one of those things that they can't separate themselves from. So even though he's doing this, they can't get rid of him. We're going to go into some of the details here in a bit. And this all culminated on July 5th, 1996, when Lydia placed a frantic phone call to Everett at his restaurant, after which none of the Thompson family would ever be seen or heard from again.
And to just kind of lay out the whole scene for you, their two sons are young. They're 11 and 8 years old, so far from full grown, young children living at home with this very violent man. And you can see how quickly things escalated. This is really from February to July of 1996. So as always, let's walk through the timeline, because a lot of you already are nodding your head saying, I know what happened. And while we kind of generally know what happened, we don't. So February of 1996, Kenneth White is released from prison after serving a term for rape. He has, quote, a long history of convictions for violent crimes, including 4 criminal sexual assaults and 2 burglaries. Now, Kenneth moves into the home with Lydia and her family being Lydia, her husband Everett, and their 2 sons, 11 and 8 years old. From the very beginning, there are problems. Kenneth is bothered by having to live in the home with Lydia when he feels like he's the rightful owner. And the Thompson family finds Kenneth to be nothing more than a freeloading house guest. He doesn't really contribute. He's violent. He's angry. He's constantly making these assertions that it's his home when they've been living there. And technically, he does. He owns a third, just like Lydia does, hence the kind of fraughtness of this inheritance from their parents.
I feel like the parents probably could have cut him out of the will, and it would have been justified. And look, I mean, this is another one of those situations. You can kind of go off on a lot of different tangents when you're talking about a case like this. You got a guy who, as Alice said, he's got four criminal sexual assaults and 2 burglaries. And you start to think, how long? How many things does somebody have to do? How many crimes does someone have to commit? How many times do they have to prove just how violent and dangerous they are before they're taken off the streets? If not forever, for a really long time, at least until they're old enough that you don't have to worry about them doing something like this again. But this is the 90s, so you would hope that things have gotten better. They haven't. But you just have to ask, this is not a guy who's got a few simple possession of marijuana charges here. I mean, this is a violent guy with a violent history. And it's interesting that he's able to live in this home with these 2 children present. If he were guilty of certain crimes, certain sex offenses, he probably wouldn't be able to do that. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say he probably was not violent towards children before, and so he's not excluded from this. But he's now in the situation where the parents don't feel like they can really do anything to stop him, where he has a legal right to be there, despite the fact that he is angry and he is controlling, and his behavior only continues to escalate.
And another thing to note, because he has been in prison for a very long time, he's a convicted felon, he probably doesn't have a lot of other options. He doesn't have another home. He doesn't probably have savings, jobs. We often talk about people coming out of, especially many years of prison, having a difficult time re-entry into society, even if they're not a violent, angry person. So this is fraught because there probably isn't somewhere else for him to go. He doesn't have another family. He doesn't have another place to go. This is his only option, which makes this entire situation even more tenuous.
So that takes us to July 3rd, 1996. So Lydia calls 911 and reports that her brother is chasing her around the home with an axe and that he is threatening to kill her. The police respond, but by the time they arrive, things have calmed down and no arrests are made. The police go inside, they look around, they don't really see anything out of place. Now look, one of the issues with this case, like some of the cases that we cover when we do these lesser known cases, is the record is just not entirely clear. And this is a very strange situation, because I would think that if Lydia calls 911 and says, this person is chasing me with an axe and threatening to kill me, even if when the police showed up, things were calm, there still would be arrest made. And it's not clear if Lydia is saying, hey, don't worry about it, things are fine now, it got out of hand. It's not clear. Or if she was saying the opposite, if she was saying, you need to do something about this, and the police were basically like, sorry, we didn't see anything, it's your word against his, there's nothing we can do. This is something that I think has gotten better. We talk about this sometimes. This is obviously domestic violence. It's not the kind of domestic violence you often think of as being partner-on-partner violence, but this is family domestic violence with a brother threatening to kill his sister, committing an assault. That is what this is. Menacing. There's all sorts of crimes you could charge him with. Today, I think the policy would probably be that he is going to be arrested and at least taken away from the scene. He may be released. She may not want to continue the prosecution. They may not have enough evidence to hold him. But I don't think they would just say, well, sorry, nothing to see here. We don't see anything out of place. You don't have any axe wounds, so we're just going to go home.
And one additional thing to note for investigative purposes, I've seen this situation where domestic violence calls are really difficult for this exact reason, because everything calms down enough that they're like, I don't want to send someone back to jail. But one thing that I've seen very good law enforcement officers do in these situations is to ask to see the weapon, ask to see the axe, to assess the situation so that if something comes up later, and it's going to come up again later, guys, spoiler alert, that they've either assessed it to see if the person who's saying, everything's okay now really feels that way, if there really was a weapon like that, and to even talk about that weapon with the people who are involved, to say something like, hey, where's this axe from? Does this need to be here? Can we maybe hand it over to a neighbor while things cool down here? Usually it's honestly with a firearm. You'll see them have this conversation, like, whose firearm is this? Is there a lock for who has the code for it? Just to talk people through it, because sometimes victims may not feel like they can press forward when law enforcement is there, but in asking these questions, they're able to kind of get to safer situations even if no arrest is made. We don't know anything about this axe, except that's not your everyday run-of-the-mill sort of call. Now, a couple days later, July 5th, 1996, Everett Thompson is at his pizzeria talking with his father, Herman Thompson, on the phone, and he's at work. The pair are just chatting, and Herman actually asks Everett on the phone when he plans to take the kids back home to Philly for a visit so that he can see his grandkids. And Everett assures him he'll be up to visit as soon as he can get the time off work. And while they're talking, Everett gets another call. He picks up that other call, and it's a frantic Lydia telling him to come home right away because Kenneth is chasing her around with an axe again, and she and her children are hiding in one of the bedrooms. Now, Kenneth switches back to the call with his dad, Herman, and quickly says, I gotta go home right away, Dad. Lydia's brother is chasing her around the house with an axe. She locked herself in the bedroom and called me to come home. That's the only reason why we know what happened at all, because he happened to be on the phone with his dad. And this is like, you couldn't write a more tragic screenplay. He's literally telling his dad, yeah, we'll come up to visit you very soon. We miss you. You'll see your grandkids soon.
Yeah, and this is sort of, like I said, sometimes you tell these stories and you forget the human element. I mean, this is the ultimate human element here. I mean, he is literally on his phone with his dad. They're planning something fun. Everything's going well. And then he gets this terrible phone call. And I think it's interesting. Who does Lydia call? 2 days ago, she called the police. And, we said we don't really have the details. We don't know exactly what happened, but context clues. 2 days before she calls the police, they don't really help her. So who does she call on this day? She calls her husband. And that tells me that encounter with the police was probably one where the police showed up. They weren't that interested. They didn't listen to her. They didn't really help her. They probably only made the situation worse. And they abandoned her there with this man and his violent tendencies. And so now, 2 days later, she's calling her husband. But the situation seems much worse. She's basically barricaded herself in a bedroom. And like I said, just the horror of this, this is like straight out of The Shining or something, where she's trying, hoping that he'll get there in time to help her with this person, her own brother, who is threatening her life. And this is where things get really weird and really inexplicable, because from this point forward, it's like a cascade of failures where just no one takes action. And it's bizarre. That's all I can say for it. So this happens. Kenneth jumps in the van. He takes off for home to help his wife. He tells the manager, who's there managing the pizza place, I gotta go. I gotta do something to help my wife. He jumps in the van and drives off. And this is the last time anyone would see or hear from Everett or any other members of the Thompson family. But it's not the last time they'd see that van. So Everett rushes home. There's a man with an axe threatening his wife. He rushes home. 2 hours later, his van shows up at the pizzeria, at the restaurant. And who is driving it? Kenneth White, his sister's brother, is now driving the van. He goes in and he tells the manager that Everett was arrested following a car accident and that he's here apparently just letting him know what happened and why, hey, if you don't see Everett for a while, well, he's in some trouble with the police. The manager notes that Kenneth has blood on his white shoes. Now, you might think at this point, I don't know, maybe call the police. But that doesn't happen. And it's one of those things where I always try and put ourselves in the shoes of the people involved and try and figure out what all is going on here. We have talked about Chicago before. We've talked about Chicago and the Chicago police and their relationship with the black community in Chicago. You've already seen in this case a circumstance where the police are called and they don't really do anything. And I feel like that is something that infects this case throughout. So the manager, despite seeing this, and despite, you would think, having some qualms about what Kenneth is telling him, doesn't call the police, doesn't take any action, and Kenneth leaves. Now, over the next few days, Everett's father, Herman, repeatedly tries to contact him, both at home and at the pizzeria, but he's never able to reach him. But he doesn't call the police either. Despite that last conversation that he had with Everett, he doesn't call the police. And for days, the situation just remains the same. Hey guys, we're back to tell you about Prolon. We've talked about this revolutionary fasting system before. I get it. You're nervous about it. You're not sure you can do it. I wasn't sure that I could do it either, but you need to forget everything you know about fasting. Prolon by L Nutra is the only patented fasting mimicking diet that combines the benefits of prolonged fasting with a science-backed nutrition plan so you can hit your weight and health goals without actually having to give up all food. It was so important to me trying to do this that I was able to take part in Prolon's scientifically prepared food. It meant that my body, even though it was getting the benefits of fasting, it wasn't telling me that I wasn't eating anything. You will like it. I promise you, it will change your views on fasting forever.
Absolutely. It's researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute and backed by leading U.S. medical centers. Prolong helps promote healthy blood sugar, support cardiovascular health, and reduce abdominal fat. But Prolong isn't a diet. Prolong is science based on Nobel Prize-winning discoveries in medicine. And this all starts with Prolong's 5-day program. You get snacks, soups, and beverages all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. It's unlike anything you've ever experienced. Right now, Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Go to prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's prolonlife.com/prosecutors for this special offer. That's prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to us talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy and you can save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles in your policy, being a homeowner, and more.
So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. And kind of adding to this, all these different people not calling the police for whatever reason, the person who has the most experience with the police, Kenneth White, note how bold he is, right? He's showing up in the car of someone who was having a conflict essentially with him, back to the pizza place within a couple hours with blood on his shoes, shows his face to give the excuse that they're not going to see Everett for a few days, as opposed to making a call, something like that. There's a boldness there in terms of like, so you see my face, so you see me driving the car. What are you or what are the cops going to do? And he's the one who's been arrested, at least 6 times, probably more. He had a run-in with the police just 2 days earlier when he was chasing his sister around with an axe. And we'll get more into this, but the timeline is a gut punch for me. That within 2 hours of Everett rushing out of the pizzeria, Kenneth is back. 2 hours is a really short time. We can talk about what happens in those 2 hours or not, but I would say that things were probably already dire, if not over, for the family members by the time Everett made it home, which is just gut-wrenching. So let's fast forward a couple weeks. 12 days later on July 17th, 1996. 12 days. Not a couple days, not 3 days. Almost an entire 2 weeks later, Herman Thompson, Everett's father, finally contacts Chicago Police Department and asks that they perform a welfare check at the Thompson family home because he has not been able to reach Everett. Again, he's close to his son, talks to his son. Not just that, literally when he loses contact with his son, the son says something really concerning. Kenneth is chasing the family around with an axe, and they're so concerned they've locked themselves in a bedroom. So it's not like he's, maybe I haven't heard from them for a couple weeks because they're on vacation or something. Literally the last thing he heard was there was an axe-wielding convict who has trapped the family in a bedroom. Still, it takes 12 days before he contacts Chicago PD, and it's not even to report that a crime has happened, but rather just asking them to do a door knock to see if they're okay. And when police arrive at the home, they are greeted by none other than Kenneth White, who tells them that the family took the van on vacation, and neither the van nor the family are present at the home at this time. So what do the police do? Do they ask questions? Do they run a check on the license plates? Do they maybe question the manager who saw the van within a couple hours of Everett leaving? And also note that there had been no plans for a vacation because remember, he does own a pizzeria. Literally had just told his father, whenever I can find time to take off, I'm going to come visit you, but it's certainly not this time right now. Did they look into any of these things? No. They're like, checks out. Van's not here. Family's not here. Nothing to see here.
Last year, we did the Ruthie Mae McCoy case, also out of Chicago. And I don't know that this one is quite as bad as that one. That one was pretty bad. But this one's right up there. I mean, we got a guy, just a bare minimum of police work, going to where the guy works. Hey, have you seen him? No, he's been gone for 12 days. Did he say he was going to go on vacation? No. Well, do you know this Kenneth guy? Yeah, he showed up in the van. He had blood on his shoes. He said that he got arrested. You mean he didn't get arrested? I mean, just the bare minimum police work here would have alerted them to what's going on. This doesn't take Columbo to get to the bottom of this. But once again, it's as if they just have no interest in taking an additional 30 minutes to look into this.
Again, it doesn't take Columbo to figure this out because over time, and it's not even a lot of time, Kenneth's story would change multiple times. He would tell a few different variations of where the family went. He said they drove the family van to Philly. Herman, the dad, is there. He can tell him they're not in Philly. Kenneth also says that the family took a bus to Minnesota.
took the bus. What happened to the van then? Don't know. Maybe it's at a bus parking lot? Nah. I mean, when they have a van to drive, kind of seems weird to have to spend, 4 tickets and then you have small children and you have a lot of luggage. Why not take the van? What's the story there? He also tells a story that, oh, never mind the van or even driving. No, the family flew to Hawaii for vacation. These are wildly different stories, and your spidey senses should be going up because 3 or 4 of these are all lies, right? And at some point after the family vanished, Kenneth was actually pulled over driving, that family van, which contradicts his own story to the police when he said they're driving the van around. And still, this didn't set off alarm bells.
So by now, this disappearance happened on July 5th. By now, it's the end of July. It's late July. The police, they've done a lot of investigation. They showed up at the house and they asked what happened. They asked Kenneth what happened, and he said, well, nothing. And so the police were satisfied. But obviously, Everett's parents, who know at least some of what's going on, they're not satisfied. So they have to take matters into their own hands. And they're sort of the heroes of this story. You may remember in that Ruthie McCoy story, there was a hero, it was a next door neighbor who really fought to find out what happened to her. In this case, it's going to be Everett's parents. So they travel all the way from Pennsylvania to Chicago to look for the family. What do? I mean, just completely out there idea. They go to the pizzeria and they find the employees who say, look, no one has seen or heard from Everett. He has been gone since July 5th. We haven't seen Lydia. We haven't seen the kids. Nobody knows where they are, and we haven't seen them in almost a month. Now, Everett has this story from the employees. He knows that Kenneth showed up and had blood on his shoes. So they now go to the police department, and they basically beg the police to take a closer look at what they believe is an absolute crime. This is a disappearance. This is not a family that just decided on a whim, heads California, tails Carolina, tails California, whatever that song was, a country song, and just took off driving in some direction. It's unclear where they went, right? That's not what happened here. And finally, the police are like, okay, we will look into it. And wouldn't you know it, when they put a little bit of effort into this, they start to discover some things which are disturbing and alarming. First of all, there was no record of Everett Thompson getting into an accident on July 5th. There was no record of him being arrested that day.
Really quick on that, too. Kenneth shows up in the van that he was supposed to have gotten in an accident of. I mean, number one, it's like, check the van. Is this a car? It had to have been in bad enough of an accident to be arrested, yet there's not a scratch on this beautiful van. I mean, there's just this is mind-boggling, right? I've tried to keep it back, but it just seems like 101 right there, investigative work.
Well, the next thing you'd probably want to do at this point is investigate that van and see if you could find any evidence of what happened. But wouldn't you know it, at this late date, they discover that Kenneth has sold the family van, and not just to some do-gooder who now can let the police look at the van, don't even need to search for it. No, he sold it to a scrapyard where it was immediately crushed and disposed of. So they're unable to examine the van at all. And they find something else. They find out that Kenneth has forged Lydia's signature and sold the home that he shared with the family. Now, there were 3 family members. It is unclear to me what happened to the other brother. If he was in the picture, if he was still alive, it's not clear to me. Not sure. He must be out of the picture somehow, because Kenneth has managed to sell the home and apparently has only forged Lydia's signature.
I was going to say, it wouldn't be that hard for him to forge 2 signatures anyways. He was going to sell this home.
That's true. Now, once again, okay, great opportunity though, because the police can go in, they can search this home. They don't even need a warrant. They can find out exactly what happened. But wouldn't you know it, by the time the police realize that he has done this, the new owners have already taken ownership of the property and they have gutted the entire interior for renovations. So the police keep looking.
Such a facepalm. You know why this is such a facepalm? It's not even that. He moved really quickly, right? If I were Kenneth, I'd be like, when are they going to come? I've already sold the house. They've already gutted it. I've already sold the van. You're making this too easy on me. This is happening not at like lightning speed. It's not like this happened overnight. And so much evidence has been lost. All the evidence really has been lost by this time. And it's been weeks.
I mean, you know, frankly, I think 2 hours into it, there would have been reason for the police to respond, but I'm going to give them some credit because apparently they're so unreliable that nobody even bothered to call them. But 12 days into it, it should have been obvious that something terrible has happened here. I mean, you have this phone call. Nobody sees the family. They go to the house. No idea where the family is. This doesn't, as you said, they should have been able to figure this out. But, you know, they delayed. And honestly, it seems like the thing that they did at the 12-day mark really helped Kenneth, because it feels like that's the point where he started to move. When the police showed up, they didn't do anything, but now Kenneth is on notice. They're looking into me. So suddenly the van is getting sold and crushed. The house is getting sold. He looks out that the family that bought it decided to renovate it, but there is one piece of information that actually probably encouraged the family to renovate. But the police are able to pull the inspector's notes from the home inspection when the house was sold. And it reveals some more really concerning details. The kitchen floor had been ripped up, which seems like a strange thing to do when you're getting ready to sell a house. But even worse, the toilet and the bathtub, and this is something that's gonna stick with me, I think, for a long time. The toilet and the bathtub in the bathroom had both been painted red.
I mean, do I just need to say what's on everybody's mind? I don't want to. He chopped them up in the bathtub and flushed parts of them down the toilet. I mean...
Yeah, and he stained it red and felt like I need to paint the whole thing now to cover it up. Yeah, that's exactly what he did.
And it's just, I don't know that that's what happened, but those of you who clean toilets, I hope you do at some point, because, you know, it's a pretty dirty part of your home. Ceramic is made to be cleaned, and for it to be uncleanable is a massive amount of, let's just say, blood on it that it could not be cleaned off, so that the only option would be to paint it all the color it already is, which is red, which happens to be the color of blood. And remember, we're talking about 4 people missing here. So just let that sit with you for a moment, because this is just horrific. And I do think he knew exactly what was going to happen. I mean, there's a way to make your home look like it needs to be gut renovated, right? It just happened that it was also a way to maybe clean up a crime scene. And so I don't think he was lucky that this new owner decided to gut renovate. I think that was the plan all along. He probably sold to the person who had the highest bid, but also was like, man, I'm going to totally gut this place. It's going to look amazing. He's like, fantastic. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say.
Now, one thing that's weird about this and makes you question exactly what was going on here, or maybe just the observantness of the police. The police claim that when they responded to the call on the 17th or whenever it was, the 12 days later, that the kitchen floors were intact and that the bathroom fixtures were not red at the time. I don't know that I believe that.
I don't think they knew. I don't think they came in.
I don't either. I think that is a total cover-up on their part. They're misleading at best to try and cover the fact that they really did not look into this at all. And who knows, if they'd walked into that bathroom or walked in that kitchen, what exactly they would have seen. I have a feeling they would have seen some pretty obvious evidence of a horrific crime. And that point, now I do think that was the point that started triggering his cleanup. I think that's when he ripped the floor up. I think that's when he painted the toilet and the bathroom red. But I don't think if the police had been in those rooms, if they had been in the bathroom or if they'd gone in the kitchen, that they wouldn't have noticed anything. They would have noticed like a giant blood puddle or stain in the middle of the kitchen. Because I think probably what happened here is she and her kids, they've locked themselves in the bathroom. He probably makes it into the bedroom. They've locked themselves in the bedroom. He makes it in. They retreat to the bathroom. That's sort of their last stand. He gets in there. I don't think there's any reason to be graphic about what happens. Then when he comes out, he's in the kitchen, and I bet that's where Everett shows up. He comes in, and I think that's probably where he was killed, in the kitchen. So you got to clean the kitchen, and you got to clean the bathroom. And I think you're probably right. I think he probably finished getting the bodies more easily disposable in the bathroom And that's why he had to basically paint the whole thing red.
And he probably moved some of it in that van, which is why the van had to be crushed as well, because it's hard to make 4 people disappear. And that's why I think the 2 hours is so telling, because I think at that point, 3 of the 4 people were dead, and he only had to kill 1 person in that time. And that would account for 1 killing, some amount of disposing of, and then driving to the pizzeria.
So he is the prime suspect now in the disappearance, but he is not arrested because even though they got a lot of suspicion, they still don't have that final piece of proof they need. And, you know, just to remind you, all you need to arrest someone is probable cause. Probable cause is a little bit of a higher standard than maybe some people want to lead you to believe. Now, I think they probably had probable cause to arrest him, but then you got to convict him, and they're not ready to do that at this point.
Which, I don't know, if this case landed on my on my desk, there'd be an arrest happening pretty soon. Well, guys, nothing happens. Literally nothing happens for a year. So this takes us to July 14th, 1997. An entire year and some days after the entire family vanishes, Kenneth White's trailer in Gary, Indiana is searched, and investigators find men's gym shoes and a boy's sock, both of which are soaked in blood, and they do determine that blood is human blood. Now you may think, maybe we should see if this is the family's blood. He doesn't have a son, so weird that he has a child's sock with him. And maybe we have a great lead. If you didn't previously have probable cause to arrest, now is the time. We're gonna move in on Kenneth White. Nope, you're wrong. White is not yet arrested. In fact, we're gonna fast forward to November 1997. Finally, Kenneth White now is arrested. But no, not for what you think. It has nothing to do with the family. He's actually arrested for a probation violation after failing to register as a sex offender, but he's released. So nothing more comes of that.
Now, fast forward 1 month. It's December 1997. This time, Kenneth White is arrested again. But it is for defrauding Citibank by depositing a $13,272.81 check into his savings account that he had forged Lydia Thompson's signature on. And at this point, he's arrested by federal authorities, essentially for bank and wire fraud. He's brought before a court on this bank fraud charge, and the federal prosecutors want to detain him. Now, often a crime like this, relatively low amount, it's a fraud case, that is not a good detention case. Typically, that person would probably be released on bond, but they didn't just arrest him for the $13,000. They knew what was going on, and they're trying to finally get justice for the Thompson family. So, in the affidavit seeking to detain him, the federal prosecutors lay out this entire alleged axe killing of the Thompson family and lay out the evidence that, in fact, Kenneth murdered his entire family, and that was a part of this bank fraud because obviously he's now forging his sister's signature on this document. And the judge does, in fact, order that White will be held at the Correctional Center pending an appearance scheduled for Monday, December 29th in federal court. Guys, I'm sure you all remember the first time you got access to the internet. You probably did a lot of things you shouldn't have done. You were hanging out in those creepy chat rooms. You were talking to people you shouldn't talk to. And frankly, you might have been putting yourself in danger. And we didn't grow up with internet the way today's kids have. You can only imagine what it's like for them. Who knows what they're seeing on social media, what music or videos they're looking up. It's unnerving to think of everything they can do on their phone now, which is why we want to tell you about this lifesaver for both parents and children, Gab. Gab is the leader in safe smartphones and watches for kids, teens, and tweens. With no social media apps, no internet browser, and GPS tracking, Gab devices were built from the ground up specifically for kids and teens and are the way to keep your kids safely connected. And Gab phones and watches are still tech kids actually want. There's unlimited talk and text, a clean music streaming app, and over 100 third-party apps that can be installed at parents' discretion.
Absolutely. You guys know that we've talked about the dangers of social media for children and the things on the internet that could just be dangerous for them. Well, recently I had to pick up my niece, who's only 9 years old, from this ballet she was a part of. It was so wonderful. It was with a professional company, but it meant she was away for hours at a time in different locations downtown. And I wanted to be able to reach her to make sure that I could pick her up at the right time because she's only 9. But I didn't want to leave her with this internet browsing device for hours at a time, not knowing what she could get. And so I'm so glad I got her Gab because I could track her, I could get in contact with her, make sure I found her right away when I needed to pick her up, but also feel safe that she had this phone with her for hours at a time without adult supervision, knowing that she was protected because Gab had the right protections in place. They are built with smart filtration that proactively block harmful content before it ever reaches your kid. That's why I think Gab is a game changer, and I can't recommend enough that you give them a try. This is the absolute best time to check them out because right now, Gab is offering $25 off any device to new customers with no contract required. That's $25 off any Gab smartphone or smartwatch. Just go to gab.com/prosecutors. That's where you'll find the best deal. That's Gab, GABB.com/prosecutors. Gab.com/prosecutors. This episode of The Prosecutors is brought to you by Huggies Little Movers. Huggies knows that babies come in all shapes and sizes, and their tushies do too. Huggies Little Movers with its curved and stretchy fit. Moms know that there's nothing worse than an ill-fitting diaper, especially for your active babies. I love Huggies because I can rely on them to keep my baby covered while she moves around. You guys have heard about my sweet little baby. She just turned 1, deep into mobility. I am so excited about Huggies Little Movers because she can roll around, jump around, climb, which is everything she's doing. And I know that she is covered, and so am I in the cleanup.
And we all want the very best for our babies, and that's Huggies. Huggies Little Movers are curved, so babies feel comfy no matter how much they're moving around. And they're moving around a lot. They also offer up to 12-hour protection against leaks, which is a game changer. Get your baby's butt into Huggies Little Movers. We got you, baby.
I mean, note that the reason this stuff is happening is because it's a different jurisdiction. It's the feds coming in, and they have a hook because of the wire fraud against the bank. And finally, it seems like maybe there will be some justice for this family, the entire Thompson family. He'll come to court, and he is going to have a hearing on December 29th. But justice is not going to be served here because on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1997, just 4 days before his court appearance, Kenneth White, at 42 years old, commits suicide. He takes his own life while in custody at the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center in Chicago, Illinois. He's found hanging from a bedsheet at 4:20 a.m. And that's it. These cases end when the person dies. So there is no adjudication with respect to the bank forgery fraud. And certainly there are no answers to what exactly happened to the Thompson family, which partly is why I think it's important that we cover this case. Because I think when we cover this case, this is the only form of justice that the Thompson family is going to have. There's not going to be a court conviction. There's not going to be someone serving prison time. The investigation is over. There's just no more answers. But what we do know is that these 4 people are not here anymore. So this is where I think storytelling is important for the sake of storytelling, because we know that there will not be justice in the courts because this man ended it so that the courts couldn't deliver justice.
And I agree with Alice. I think, you have a case like this where a family's disappeared, their body's never found, there's never justice for them. I think one of the things we can at least do is keep their story alive. I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on theories in this case. It's pretty well accepted that we know exactly what happened here, that Kenneth, he did kill the Thompson family. If there's anybody out there who thinks, well, what if they just went off and started a new life? Because there's always somebody who thinks that. The circumstances here are pretty damning. There's the call from Lydia There's the fact that none of the family's ever seen again. Their social security numbers never ping again. Their credit cards are never used again. His story changes 1,000 times. And we know the motive. He didn't want to share the house with them. That was his reason for murdering this family. He had decided that was it.
Literally, like if they lived somewhere else, I don't think this would have happened. I think it was literally he wanted that house. That was it. It's not like he has long hated Lydia and her family. It was that they were in his house.
And look, I think in some ways this is a testament to murder is hard to get away with if someone looks into it. But you give somebody enough time, all of a sudden it gets easier to get away with. There's a lot of places to get rid of a body, or in this case, 4 bodies. And he had a lot of time to do it. And he had a lot of heads up when the police were looking at him. And I think the fact that he's able to do that, to get rid of those bodies, is a remarkable thing. I do think this is another sort of advertisement, I'm going to say, for people like Othram. Because a lot of times you see these John Does, you see these Jane Does, you see these remains, these unidentified remains. You don't know who they are. And a lot of times they can close the book on some of these cases. I mean, for all we know, there may be a body sitting in a morgue somewhere or buried in a pauper's grave that belonged to a member of this family. And I think it's another reason just to continue supporting those efforts, and why it never stops being important to try and give people their names back. And it may be a little thing, but this family, they deserve closure. And I know that's strange, but they do. They deserve to be buried in a cemetery where their family members can visit them. They deserve to have their story told, and for us to all know what happened to them. I mean, Andrew was 8. Everett Jr. was 11. Everett was only 40. Lydia was 43. I mean, these were young people, the prime of their lives, everything ahead of them, everything going right, a beautiful family, and then they have this monster walk in, and this happens. And I wish there were... I'm trying to come up with something positive to pull out of this story, but I'm having trouble with it.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble with it too. This is one, I think, we don't know exactly what happened on that July 3rd domestic violence call, but this is something that I have had to tell so many of our victims and also my friends. Domestic violence, and law enforcement will tell you this, those are the scariest, most fraught calls that they have to respond to, and they often are the precursor to much, much, much more violent actions by the perpetrator. But these are also the most underreported crimes because they involve usually a family member or a loved one or someone you have a relationship with, like you share a child with them, you are an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, etc. You're a mother, you're a father, whatever. And because of those relational ties, people often think, okay, I don't want to blow this out of proportion. I don't want to create more trouble. So it's not just not wanting to report someone they may have ties to. It's also that they have to face this person every single day because they usually live with them. That's usually where the domestic violence is spun out of, the fact that they share a closed space together. And so sometimes it's out of just fear of retaliation and retribution if they are going to take that step of reporting them to the police. Because of all these things, domestic violence incidents are very, very underreported. And even if the police is called, it is very rare that people will want to press charges or even speak up and say what actually happened so that there can be a document of it. I tell everyone, please document this. If not for your sake, then the next person. Because someone who's willing to take these actions against someone that they are very close to, think about what they will do to just the next person on the street. And sometimes when you have a federal prosecutor or someone who gets a file like this and has the entire history of things, even if he was going to go to trial for just the forgery, all this other, disappearance and rape stuff isn't going to come in for that charge. But now you're on someone's radar who, if they really want to look into it, has enough to look into. Because all the stuff we talk about of 404B, not be able to come in for trial purposes, yes. But you know what happens when you get a file on a criminal defendant? You have the entire file. The prosecutor sees everything ahead of time. And so I have done this before where I've looked into one case and I'm like, holy cow, what the heck happened here? And I just start digging in the other incident because it's usually some sort of DV event that led to something horrific, but there are no charges of it. There's nothing in the record, but there's enough there in the record for me to see it, for my spidey senses to go up to want to dig more. So I always say, please, if you know someone who is in this situation, encourage them to make a report of it. They can do it anonymously. They can do it after the fact. The person doesn't need to know about it. But make a record of it, because sometimes that record could be the difference between this person ultimately meeting justice, or someone who gets the file can properly look into it and prevent more violence down the line.
And if you're listening to this and you're a social worker or a prosecutor or a cop, and we got a lot of you out there, we're doing much better about taking these cases and these calls seriously, the ones that Alice is talking about, but we have to be even more vigilant on these things. We have to take them seriously every time. And when someone does call, it needs to be more than just a note in a file. It needs to be action taken by law enforcement. I don't know what would have happened here if Kenneth had been arrested that day. Maybe nothing. I mean, the system is not great. I mean, I'll say this. He'd just been released from prison. He gets a probation violation later on, which tells me he's on probation. Why didn't that violate his probation? Why didn't it violate his parole? To be threatening someone with an axe. And yeah, that would have taken, you would have had to have arrested the guy and you'd done the paperwork. And a lot of times, for whatever reason, police and prosecutors, they don't really like probation parole violations because it's not as sexy. It's not a new case. It's not a new crime. Maybe the stats are different. But if he had been arrested and his parole revoked, who knows how this story would have ended up. We probably wouldn't be talking about it tonight. I don't know exactly how things would have gone. But this wasn't that long ago. It was just the 90s. We're not talking about a case from the 70s or the 60s. This is the 90s. Longer ago than I would like it to be honest with you. And things have improved, but we still got a long way to go. So if you're out there, learn from this case. Don't let this happen on your watch. Be the person who takes the action that can save, in this case, 4 lives.
And I want to note one other thing in terms of like lifting the veil and looking behind prosecutorial discretion. So you guys have heard of us talk about this, and you've probably heard of the charge of like felon in possession of a firearm, which is quite literally just that. Someone who's been a convicted felon who has a firearm. They don't have to shoot it. They don't have to do anything. And oftentimes we'll hear criticism like, why are you going after this guy for owning a gun? Partly because oftentimes you may not see this in court because it's not part of that file, but we have the entire case file. We have way too many people to charge to just go after willy-nilly, like random Joe Schmo who one time didn't pay all his taxes in the year 2013, so he has a gun and now we're going to arrest him. Rather, we see these files and you will see these charging decisions usually going after the worst of the worst who've never really faced any serious consequences for it. It's a way to protect further victimization when we see something like this with charges like that. And that's exactly what they did with this forgery charge, this bank fraud, wire fraud charge, right? Like, it's wire fraud. Why the heck do you have an affidavit about this axe-wielding potential killer of a family of 4? Because they recognized what was going on, these prosecutors. And they were like, not on our watch. Like, if he could do it to these 4 people, he can do it to anybody else as well. So these are things that you don't see in court because that information will not be even shown to the judge. But it's part of that prosecutorial discretion and understanding of like why we're charging certain things. But that's just to give you a little glance behind the veil of what we're looking at and why we decide to charge at the times that we decide to charge. That's why Al Capone was charged with tax fraud. That's not his worst crime, certainly not. But that was the way the feds could get him. It's the similar idea. And I'll say this.
It's one of the reasons that prison overcrowding is more complicated than people like to make it out to be. Because sometimes you'll hear that people are in prison for a very long time for non-violent crimes. A lot of times that's because they're a really violent person, but that's the only crime they could get them for. So Alice used the example of felon in possession, which is a non-violent crime. And we have defense attorneys argue all the time that it's a regulatory offense. It's just, he has a gun when he shouldn't have one, And I get that. That's their job. They're trying to mitigate the sentence. But these are tools that are often used to try and keep the worst people off the streets because you want to get them off the streets before you have a violent crime. that you have to prosecute again. And it's just unfortunate that didn't happen in this case. Well, look, we want to hear your thoughts on this. prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. If there's a case you want to hear, one that you find interesting or you think people will like, or that we can draw some good lessons from, like this case, please shoot us an email. I'm not even sure how we found this case. It may very well have been one of you reaching out to us and pointing this case out. I know as soon as I saw it, wherever I saw it, it was one I wanted to do, because I couldn't believe that 4 people disappeared in a situation like this, that the police response was so lackadaisical, and then nobody covers this case. Because, I mean, I get it. It's short and it's solved, but this is one that people need to talk about. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you to all our patrons who join us live for these episodes and also get episodes early and ad-free. And we love you guys. Y'all are the best. And remember, if you leave a 5-star review and you leave a question, we will answer it for you. And, you know, we just got finished doing the Karen Reed case. You guys won't hear this until a few other cases have gone through, but we just got finished doing the Karen Reed case. And I feel like every episode was 8 hours long. And so we didn't actually get to do many questions. But today we have a relatively short one. So, Alice, do you want to answer some hopefully happy questions today?
Absolutely. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that something that you lost in childhood? We know that kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. But what's something you'd like to learn? I know I would love to garden, get better at my language skills, or I don't know, pick up a new sport. Well, here's the thing about that curiosity. You can learn new coping skills even now through therapy. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back to school era can come at any age. And here's the thing for me. I love learning these additional positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, because it helps me get better in my personal life and in my professional life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try.
Guys, it is entirely online. It is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. There is no better time to rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/prosecutors today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/prosecutors. Okay.
I would love to.
Let's do a fun one. Okay, let's see if I can find a fun one. You guys ask such serious questions.
Such serious thinkers.
Such serious. You really are. Oh, this is a good one. It's been a while. We've been asked this question before, but it's been a while since we answered it, so we'll see if we have a different answer. This is from Bertum, and Bertum wants to know, what has been your favorite case that you have covered and why?
I previously said Salem witch trials, so I'm trying to think if I should come up with a new one just to have a different answer. But I really do love that case because of the entire historical arc of it all. And, Brett, it was an October one. All
That's
you
true.
20%ers who drop off at October, we have some great October cases. And even though I don't love them because I get freaked out, one of my favorites, look at that, Salem witch trials.
I mean, that was a fun one. I mean, Karen Reed for me is my favorite case that we've covered. I wish we could have done 20 episodes on that one. So I always say Dyatlov Pass. I won't say Dyatlov Pass this time. What is my favorite? I mean, I really enjoy the October episodes, obviously. I enjoyed the Scott Peterson episodes. It was the first sort of real deep dive we've ever done. First time we did an entire trial. First time we did, I think, a controversial case. I mean, this is the first really controversial case we did. And I guess, I don't know. Mortimer was pretty controversial. But I think that was a turning point for us in the podcast. I feel like we really sort of took a step after that one. So I'll say Scott Peterson. I think a lot of people who are listening came to us because of Scott Peterson. So that'll be one. I mean, now we've done 200. By the time we did this is like our 265th episode or something, which is just mind-blowing. I can't even believe it.
I know.
Okay, let's see. So we've covered this one before, but just briefly, Amanda wants to know if someone is found not guilty, then confesses years later, can they be retried? No, they cannot be retried.
Double Jeopardy, y'all.
Double Jeopardy. We did an episode on Double Jeopardy.
That's why
Legal
you
Briefs.
can write books like If I Did It.
Exactly. We get to ask that question all the time because people just can't believe it. They just can't believe that that's how it works. But
this
is how it
is
works.
just another example of how the Constitution is meant to protect. Like, it really is meant to protect even in these instances, because you don't get multiple bites of the apple, because it is fraught for abuse. And like the founding fathers decided in constitutional protections that they would rather avoid that type of abuse than the situation where someone is found not guilty and confesses later on. Not to mention there are false confessions and all these other things.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question, and then we'll probably wrap it up. But this is from Stage Grandma. Stage Grandma, first of all, she says, congratulations on the Crime Con Award. So that tells you we got a lot of questions built up because this one's about a year old. She wants to know, does the award make you feel more pressure, or is it just validating for you and the community you've built?
I wouldn't know. I don't have the award.
Ha, ha, ha.
For those of you who don't know, Brett has kept it hostage. I've never seen it. We don't have joint custody of it, so
you see it every episode.
It's done nothing for I don't feel pressure or anything because I don't know that it exists.
Mm-hmm. I see it right behind you. What are you talking about? I can see your
only thanks to Joel, who 3D printed me one. Thanks, Joel.
Joel's awesome. I will answer your question seriously because I respect you and your question, unlike Alice, who just made a joke out of it. No, I mean, it doesn't make me feel any more pressure. The thing that makes me feel pressure, and which absolutely makes me feel pressure, is the number of people who write to us and talk about how they don't know what to think about a case until we cover it, and they want to hear us talk about it. And I'm always like, man, that's a lot of pressure because now we have to talk about it and we have to be really careful and we got to, and honestly, I think it's one of the reasons some of our episodes, some of our series have gotten so long because it's really hard to decide what to leave out because I'll just tell you, if you leave anything out, somebody's going to say you left out the most important thing. If only they'd have said that one thing, that would have convinced everybody that they were wrong. So that's why they left it out. And it's really hard to decide, you know, how are we going to cut this down? How are we going to keep it interesting? I mean, the Karen Reed thing, we went for 9 episodes. We could have gone for 20.
It could have been. It was Murdaugh, at least double Murdaugh length, just because of everything there was to address.
Absolutely.
I will take, thanks for making fun of my answer, but I will take a slightly different approach to that answer, which is that this is a reason that I will never actually be famous or anything like that, because the longer we've done this, the 200 plus episodes we've done for 4 years, all those things, I cannot say anything other than what I actually think. People who know me in my life are like, of course, we knew that. But like, I can't be swayed to say something I don't believe in. And so while I like feel the pressure, I'm like, oh, a lot of people think this, or they think they're guilty or they're not guilty. When I actually start recording, none of that actually enters my psyche. And I just look at the evidence in front of me and I'm like, no, this is what I see. Maybe I'm wrong in my interpretation, but you can't force me or shame me or Reddit me into saying something I don't believe. Which I am glad, because I don't ever want to change that. And I would never change that to like get an award or not get an award. Clearly, this is why I'll never be famous, because like you can't pay me to say something that I don't believe in. But I think that's what I love about things like that award, because it's so nice to know that like what I really see as truth in the world, I'm not standing alone. Like other people are like, yeah, we also see that. And sometimes I think when you have a lot of voices out there that are saying something that is completely irrational, not based in evidence, a lot of people think I'm just the wrong one, right? Like that sounds sketchy to me, or I don't feel like I can even ask questions because the social media warriors are too loud and shouting me down even if I ask questions. I feel like validated that they also see it, and when they see an award like this, they can think, you can speak the truth. You can truly do the boring thing, which is like talk about the law and the evidence and not about wild theories. And it resonates with people because I think people really are seeking truth. So it's a really long way of saying, no, I just feel so thankful that people want to listen to us, despite the fact that we won't change our opinions, no matter like how loud the haters shout.
I would like to say that we're just so principled and we stand on truth and we would never. But the reality is I'm just incapable of it. I can't do it. Even if I wanted to do it, I would not be able to do it.
We're bad at it. We're bad business people.
I gotta tell you, these people are crazy. You know, and it's funny. We're in this weird period right now in true crime where there are all these scandals about exactly this, where people are sort of found out to be, I don't know, selling a party line because of the money, right? And I just couldn't do it. That's why we'll never be as successful as maybe we could be.
Which we don't care, right? Like
that's fine.
That's actually the beauty of it all. That's why I love CrimeCon, because like it makes me so happy when someone's like, I also was like, why are we spending so much time on this hit and run? And I'm like, me too, girl, me too.
Yeah, it's like we joked, you know, we ended up on 2020 on the one case that we said the guy was innocent. All of a sudden they want us on 2020. It's like, well, I guess this is why everybody's innocent.
You should listen to the rest of the podcast because that one really is a standout.
But all right. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to share before we sign off for tonight?
No, but thank you for allowing us to storytell tonight. There was no trial to cover. There were really no kind of legal elements in terms of like in sentencing enhancements and whatnot. But this is, I think, what is so important about true crime storytelling. So thank you for allowing us to tell the Thompson family story, to give them a small ounce of justice in kind of our tiny podcast world. And please keep bringing stories like this to our attention, because I am just shocked that more haven't covered this and more people haven't talked about it. So thank you guys for making sure we're seeing these types of cases. We couldn't do it without you, and we want to hear from you.
And people seem to have gotten it, but if you send the suggestions to Gmail, that is the best way to do it. Happy to see you on any other platform, but if you send them to Gmail, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, that's the best way to suggest them. Do it, and you will hear the stories eventually. If we do this long enough, we're going to cover them all. So we'll see. Okay, guys, we'll be back next week with a new case. Can't wait to cover it with you. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Don't you guys think I don't know? It's all of you who are leaving all those really nice reviews on the A&E podcasts, like shouting me out and saying such nice things. Like, you guys sound like I pay you to write those things. I know it's you guys, you prosecutee listeners. And I just want to say, I see it. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. No one's writing a review but you guys, but I really appreciate it.
And this is Alice's way of advertising for her other two podcasts, American Justice and City Confidential. Check them out wherever you get podcasts.
I'm like literally walking upstairs to come record, and he's like, "Can I ask you a question about a search warrant?" And I'm like, "Right now?" And I was like trying to answer the question as I'm walking up the stairs. I was like, there's a lot more to this discussion about probable cause. And in case you guys ever wondered if all the like stereotypes of being married to a lawyer are true, yes. All we talk about is the law.
Do you love shows like Criminal Minds and Mindhunter? Are you interested in what it's really like for the agents that break down the psychology of violent offenders, serial killers, and sexual predators? If the answer is yes, you'll love The Consult, Real FBI Profilers. I'm Julia Cowley. I spent 22 years in the FBI and was assigned to the renowned Behavioral Analysis Unit. Join me, along with my colleagues, retired FBI profilers Angela Surser, Susan Kostler-Drew, and Bob Drew, as we look at some of the most notorious cases that have ever come into the Bureau. We'll take you inside the tape and into our thought processes as we analyze the behaviors, motives, and methods of criminals like JonBenet Ramsey's killer, serial killers like Israel Keys and Joe DeAngelo, and we'll examine some of the most perplexing cases, such as the murder of Washington, D.C. attorney Robert Wone. It's more than just a podcast. It's a real-world look at how the FBI uses criminal psychology to assist law enforcement in our mutual quest for justice. Join our brand new Patreon for early and ad-free episodes and listen to The Consult, Real FBI Profilers, available wherever you listen to podcasts.